Hey, I'm Steve Oakers,
Julie Bacon.
Liz Keegan.
Sue Pastor.
and this is What's in the Cup. Cheers!
Cheers.
So much coffee.
Lots of coffee.
That's good. So Liz is joining us. Thank you
Yes.
for joining us. We're talking fair housing, right? It's Fair Housing Month. You have your event in a couple days.
Yes.
They might watch this after the event, but could you tell us really like what the impact of fair housing is in West Michigan and then nationally, and then how can we get involved?
We like to think that our impact is, to the best of our ability, ensuring that housing choice is occurring in our communities.
Housing choice.
So, people can make their determinations about what matters to them, what they need in their lives, what are the amenities surrounding their home, whether it's an apartment or a home for sale, their first time purchase, and then determine this is what works for me, I'm gonna go after this, and they have a fair shot of getting it. The competitiveness of the market right now is, of course, changing that dynamic and adding that layer of difficulty. But we really believe that having an educated housing professional community and an educated home seeker community will help us achieve that equality across the board. That is behind all of the education that we do, all of the outreach that we do, some of the things that we've done together. We have really tried to tailor the message to any audience. Everyone has a stake in fair housing. Our country has a stake in fair housing. We want to be a welcoming community. When people are recruited by employers to come here, we want them to buy if they want to, rent if they want to, but feel welcomed, invest and engage in our communities, and stay here. We're not going to sustain this great energy and growth unless we have that welcoming community, and I think fair housing is a huge part of that. And right now, with April being Fair Housing Month and it's the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act, there's been a tremendous national conversation, which is really exciting, looking at some of the historical pieces that Ryan mentioned in the earlier episodes and the work of Dr. King that led us to this point. We've had great success. We are not where we were. However, with the cases that we're accepting and the trends that we're seeing, we're not done. So we have a lot of opportunity to get creative, to work with the industry, to have them invite us in, engage with fair housing in the way that works best for that audience, whether it's a home buyer class, 15 minutes of first grade classroom. We have a housing choice game that simulates what it's like to be discriminated against.
It's really fun.
Julie has
Yeah.
facilitated that
Yeah.
with me, and we did it with 18 to 24-year-olds who were about to move. And I think it was a really eye-opening experience for them and for us.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I'm like, oh, wow.
This
I mean,
is
I
what
live
it
in the
looks
bubble,
like.
in
Right,
a bubble, you
right.
know, so, yeah.
And we're, all of us are represented in the protected classes, but we're not necessarily experiencing that type of discrimination that we know of. So we see discrimination against people with disabilities, whether it's just, I'm not going to allow you to put a ramp up here. That's a red flag. I didn't know you were in a wheelchair when you called. I don't want to deal with that. They hang up on you. Assuming that someone is going to develop PTSD because they've served overseas. Those sorts of things are disability-based discrimination. Refusal to allow assistance animals, that's a very hot topic, or even assign a parking spot that works for that person's limitations. Those are common things that we see. We also see race and national origin-based discrimination where people simply get dropped. They don't get served or called back, or on the flip side, they're penalized. They're charged more. It's harder to jump through the hoops, so to speak, of going through the application process.
How, so this just sort of popped in my head, so I always
Sure.
ask the questions. It might be good or bad, I don't know. And there's a lot of coffee running through here. So I guess one thing is also generational change is happening,
Yes.
right? So it's very easy for me to just say, well, my parents or my grandparents, that was their issue.
Yes.
Fair housing was their issue. They were just ignorant and didn't educate themselves enough. Like, that's not my problem.
societal,
right?
yes.
It was an issue back in the day. It's not like I don't need to worry about it anymore.
Right.
And I think you would probably argue the direct opposite, and I know Ryan would as well, is because we grew up with those folks, some of that runs through us now. And how do we get educated in that, right? To make sure that we don't have our kids saying, well, they were just ignorant, right?
Right.
They didn't educate themselves, right?
Right.
How does
That's
our
a wonderful question, and
you
an
know.
important one where, as Ryan was saying, know the history of the community. The housing movements in and of themselves inform our communities today. When you look at redlining maps and then you look at a racial dot map of where people live based on race in 2010 in Grand Rapids, The clustering of racial groups is in those lower scoring neighborhoods to this day. So people of color are still living in those disinvested neighborhoods. So we know that now, and we need to challenge ourselves to come up with new initiatives and new ideas to better understand how to break that cycle. I think the biggest piece is knowing your history, knowing fair housing, reaching out to us, engaging with our events, our classes, bringing us in to speak. We can tailor the message to a loan office or the maintenance staff of a property at an apartment complex. Everyone has a stake in compliance, but also fair housing makes for stronger neighborhoods and stronger communities. And oftentimes when we say these are the types of cases that we get now, people were thinking, I didn't realize that was discrimination. It's evolved.
Yeah.
The internet has changed, the entire housing business. So that's
Absolutely.
a whole other episode. But we have to be vigilant and rely on all of you who are trained and passionate about fair housing to raise your hands and say, this is an issue. Let's challenge this. Let's bring it to the Fair Housing Center. We're a staff of 7 in more than 12 counties. So we really rely on our advocates, our members, our friends to be that voice when we are not in the room.
Yeah. Liz, how would people connect with you, right? So anybody that's been watching these episodes that are like, hey, I want to learn more. I didn't quite get enough here through this conversation of just 10 or 15 minutes worth of videotape.
Yeah.
How would they interact with your organization? How would they get connected, and how could they learn?
I'd say the first step would be to visit us on Facebook or our website, fhcwm.org.
Okay.
We're the same handle on Facebook, if I can say that. I just dated myself, I know, but I don't know what to call it. We are on Facebook, and that's a huge step forward. So, find us online, but we're a very present staff. You can stop by the corner of Hall and Division. You can call us. As I mentioned, we don't have caller ID, but we also do some large events each year, one here in Grand Rapids this week, one in Holland I'm planning on the Lake
have
Shore.
one
We do a
next week.
breakfast. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm speaking for the Michigan Mortgage Lenders Association. I've been on a bit of a fair housing tour this month, working with Habitat and other groups. So we, I think the website is probably the first stop, but reaching out to us and saying, hey, can we get a class? Can we get a speaker? Can we get materials? We've got materials in 6 different languages now, so we're hopefully equipped to provide something to anybody who's looking for fair housing information.
Awesome. Thank you so much for watching these 6 episodes with Ryan and Liz about fair housing and affordable housing. It is a big deal. It's a big deal for us. We need to be educated on this as real estate professionals, but professionals or anybody that lives in this community. I was watching, which I'm sure you guys were, Mr. Zuckerberg in front of Congress last week, if you haven't watched it, and some of the questions about fair housing came up, right? And ultimately real estate agents or mortgage professionals redlining using Facebook algorithms.
Right?
We're talking about that.
And so
Yeah.
this isn't just a thing to say it happened before.
Right.
I would suggest that a lot of you, if you've done Facebook marketing and drew a line of where you wanted your ad to go, the likelihood is you were breaking fair housing laws. And so don't think that you're not a part of this. We all need to be educated, and we're really excited that you spent the time with us. I'm Steve Okers.
Julie Bacon.
Liz Keegan.
Sue Pastor.
That's What's in the Cup. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.